Hello and welcome to the Roundtable with Revolutionaries. I am your host, Becky Richard. Our revolutionaries today are going to be Thomas Aquinas, Johann Pestalozzi, Jane Addams, and W.E.B. Du Bois. Our agenda for today is we're going to introduce our revolutionaries, talk about why they're here and why they are revolutionaries, how they have influenced the lives of others, talk about how it has worked in our lives, and then just show our acknowledgments to them. So our first revolutionary is Thomas Aquinas, and he was with us from 1225 to 1274. He was a theologian and a philosopher during the Middle Ages, and combined his foundations of Christian doctrine to the liberal arts, and really sort of connected the two of them to show the importance of education from a liberal standpoint, but also bringing in those Christian values, which was very important. He also felt that education should have a means to an end, and it should be purposeful to the people who are learning it. Without it being purposeful, they see it sort of as pointless, which is something that we face with our students today as well. Our next revolutionary, Mr. Johann Pestalozzi, was a Swiss educator and innovator in education, and he is one who you might call just the founder of inclusive education. He included all different populations of children, specifically the orphaned children. Really felt that it was important to just build a relationship with them in order for them to be able to learn, just because of their past and things that they had been through made it difficult for them to learn. I really love how he integrated various kinds of outside of the classroom activities into his theories. The idea of integrating agriculture, children would actually work. In one of his early schools, it tried to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient. It didn't work out the best, but I think he was really onto something with incorporating various practices into the educational setting. And the other thing that I love about his concepts are the idea to unite home with school and then school with a local community, and just how that really plays such a huge factor in making the students successful, the school successful, and in turn then making the community successful. Our next innovator is Miss Jane Addams. She was an American pioneer, really in integrating culture and education and community outreach all in one big format. And she did this through the Hull House. And the thing about the Hull House was that she recognized that the immigrant community that she had decided to immerse herself in really needed their physical and just legitimate needs met. They needed childcare. They needed affordable health care. They needed a clinic that they could go to and that their children could go to. They needed a place for their students and their children to just be with them, and to be under a supervision of something while both parents were working. She also was very quick to recognize the shift and the idea of community and it being which was set in a rural setting into an urban setting, and just how that influenced the various types of things, anything from agriculture to industry to education. She was also very, very passionate about educating immigrants and reaching the immigrant community, seeing that she was alive in the early 1900s, and just everything that brought with it. And just her passion about making sure that population was reached. And our last revolutionary is Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a very loud voice in advocating for civil and educational rights for the African American community, as well as other individuals, not necessarily of the African American community, who were not given those rights as well, to just have the freedom to have an education, as well as the freedom to practice in the various civil areas that were required and expected when it comes to the idea of being a free person. He, through all of his education through the United States at Harvard, as well as over into Europe and into Germany, offered just beautiful insights into the social constructs and how race truly plays a factor in these constructs, whether it is verbally acknowledged or just sort of this underlying hidden language and hidden constructs that we are really we need to be forced to recognize and to identify if we want to be true innovators with education and make sure we are reaching all of the populations who deserve to be educated. And the other thing that I really enjoy about him is that he recognized that in order for children's imaginations to really be stimulated, you need to have an equal and level learning environment for them to be able to really explore the various things that will just strike their interest. How all of these revolutionaries have influenced me is really it was really good for me to be able to put names and faces to the theories of why I think and why I do education the way that I do it. Education should be valued by our society and by the individual. As our first revolutionary Aquinas is shared with us, is that we need to make sure that the individual understands that this education is powerful and that it's useful and that they will be able to use it. It needs to be valued by society so our society can put in the funding, not just at a federal level, but at a local level as well. And it needs to be something that we look at and value the people who have dedicated their lives to teaching, and that we can make sure that we are truly giving them the acknowledgement and the support that they need to continue to educate individuals. Sort of sliding right into that is that education needs to be meaningful. It needs to be meaningful to the student. It doesn't make any sense to them why they are learning the derivative of something if they can't apply it to a real life situation. It needs to be done creatively, kind of like Pastoli was talking about in integrating the agriculture. I love the idea of integrating various forms of education. So integrating those hands-on activities, making making a garden outside of your classroom, showing the life cycle, showing how the idea of erosion works with the land around you is just a great idea. And I think really can reach the various types of students with their various types of learning styles. The other thing is that it needs to be consistent. We need to make sure that our students are getting consistent information, and it is something that we acknowledge. Some things just need to be memorized. Some things just need to be done by rote, and it makes things easier. While I also acknowledge and see that this is difficult and sometimes goes against the idea of my next point, which is being flexible. It needs to be something that students and children are consistently getting, the idea of being educating and stimulating that mind. And the idea of being flexible. We need to be able to mold our curriculum and mold our form and our type of education and the way that we teach to meet the needs of the students who are in our classrooms. So these students could be coming from different ethnic backgrounds. They could be coming from different levels of parent involvement, different levels of just the idea of valuing education. Some cultures don't necessarily value it as much as others. So we need to be flexible, identify those needs and those differences, but also figure out a way to really harness those concepts, but meet the student where they are, but at the same time, help them see and make it meaningful to them, bring it back to something that is meaningful to them so they can see why they need to be here. I think leading into that, it needs to be equal among all populations. There is such a large discrepancy between the types of resources available for our more affluent districts and our very low poverty districts. The children are the same. The children deserve the same education. They deserve the same opportunities and the same quality of education. I wish there was an easy fix for that. I don't know what that is, but I feel that we need to acknowledge it. We need to start to brainstorm. We need to be flexible. We need to show a way to connect school to home, home to community, and then in turn connecting the community back to the school. And that leads into our last point of being connected. It needs to be connected to the people in the community so they feel the need to pour into the students in that community. It's amazing what a community can do when it really gets together and has an equal goal in mind and a common goal in mind of making sure that their children and the children in their community are getting the very best thing possible. And I truly believe that it is possible if we just can break down some of the those social constructs that our dear friend W.E.B. Du Bois told us about, and really look past the things that are keeping us from being successful. How I have seen this into action and how I put it into action, I try and build a relationship with all of my students that I work with. I try to figure out what their passion is. If they can tell me, then beautiful. If they can't, I try and work with them to figure out what their passion is and then be able to connect that to the degree that they have. And if that degree that they have does not really line up with the passion that they have, we have some hard conversations to really try and see if it is the best choice for them, and figure out what works for them. I challenge them to think outside the box when it comes to education and when it comes to educating their students. I also challenge them to think outside the box when it comes to doing their assignments, to really sort of help them figure out the best way to get the most information from our courses. I like to challenge their personal biases and their beliefs. It's really something that I really enjoy, helping students see their personal bias and how that influences their type of education, their type of or the way maybe that they would interact with students. I think it's very, very helpful for us to be self-aware of where our limitations lie and where our biases lie, because it helps us be more transparent and more real with our students. And the more real that we are, the more they're going to trust us, and the more that they are going to have faith and put their trust in us to advocate and to help teach them. And again, leading into the advocate, I do my best to always advocate for my students, be it academically or even within their workforce, to try and help them and give them the tools that they need to advocate for their students as they enter into the field of education. And finally, I just saw this and it made me chuckle. I love Lucy's idea of going to school and contemplating whether is it really worth this 12 years of my life? And I truly hope and pray that as educators, we can influence our students in the most biblical way possible, while helping them see that there is value. We need to learn to take our biblical worldview and see how we can apply that to our students in a public education setting, which is where I had the majority of my experience. And now being in a Christian setting, I truly feel like there are times we are less Christian in our Christian setting than our non-Christian setting. So I think it's just a great opportunity for us to really challenge and see how we can best take the gospel and spread it to those who we interact with on a daily basis. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time at the Roundtable with Revolutionaries.